Hello everyone, welcome. In this video, let's talk about the 2-4 invasion, right here. Before you proceed, please make sure that you've already watched the 2-5 invasion, because the 2-5 invasion is considered the optimal move. So it does not make a lot of sense for you to only watch and learn the 2-4 invasion, because this is not optimal. And some of the moves, some of the variations we'll see, we'll either go back to some of the same things we saw in the 2-5 invasion, or the results will likely favor black, because once again, the 2-4 invasion exists, but it is not as effective as the 2-5 invasion. So what are black's choices after white's 2-4 invasion? There are quite a few. There's A, the 3-3 point, B, C, D, E, and even F. And E and F are really newer moves under AI. A lot of the older Josekis books and explanations do not even cover E and F. And if you could take a guess, which one of these moves is the optimal move for black? Can you guess which one? Well, we'll talk about it in just a little bit. But before we start talking about these 6 moves, as always, I'd like to talk about a couple of wrong moves that might seem a little intuitive, and that is these 2 attachments. They simply do not work, right? This is a note for beginners and some Q players. You might think this works. Of course, you want to seal off the corner this way, but no, your opponent is going to cut you off, disconnect this attaching stone. And if you sacrifice this stone, it really doesn't make any sense. The corner is already alive for white, and black's wall still has a cutting point on the outside. So black gains nothing by sacrificing this stone, right? So that is why you should not play this, right? Similarly, this will not work. The start point will just get cut off, and some on the outside here, it's going to be similar. White can just cut it off, and black's shape is in 2 pieces, right? Once again, if you sacrifice this stone, black doesn't gain anything, right? If you play this sequence, this is much better for black without sacrificing the stone. So the sacrifice is useless. That is why you never see the attachments against the 2-4 invasion. These 2 moves are simply wrong for black. Now we can look at some of these other moves. First one is very simple. It is the 3-3 point. When we talked about the 2-5 invasion, we said the 3-3 points is a little too slow, right? Because it is just a little too far from number 1, and it's not putting enough pressure. But if you play the 2-4, then black's 3-3 point makes sense, because it is close enough, right? It prevents white from taking the 3-3 point, and now white will have to play on the upper side, right? You cannot push toward the corner, because this way, the corner is simply too small. So this is definitely not acceptable for white. Only 2 points, right? And the wall on the outside is pretty solid for black. So white cannot be happy with living on the corner with 2 points. So that is why white cannot crawl here. White must play on the upper side. And depending on the situation, white has 3 choices. One is to play a small knight's move, but most likely black can pincer, right? So there are ways for black to put pressure on white, as we'll see in some of these variations. And white will probably have to jump out. Of course, in the future, right, you can have one ROI here, right? So this is not a bad base for white, but white will still have to escape toward the center. Another move is to play further apart. Of course, black potentially can cut off number 1, but white might be happy, right, to sacrifice number 1 and get a better shape on the outside, right? So black most likely, once again, is not going to to take the bait, right? It's just a stone on the second line. After this exchange, it's no longer that valuable. So black will probably, once again, play a pincer and put some more pressure on white. So this is a better base for white than the base we just saw. So most likely, this is a better move than the small knight's move. And another move in the age of AI is an extra large knight's move. Once again, this is basically saying if black really wants to cut off number 1, be my guest, right? Of course, number 4 is not cutting off number 1. White can still connect back very easily, right? You probably have to play a move like this. And if that's the case, actually, white can choose to come out and fight. This is one of the options. Or white can just ignore it and play something else on the upper side, right? And if black pincers, right, this gives white another more flexibility, I would say, right? So this is an even better base than this one. So that's why you should also consider the extra large knight's move. Because once again, after this exchange, number 1, this 2-4 invasion on the second line can be sacrificed very easily. So white should keep that flexibility in mind. And that is why number 2 is probably not the optimal move among all these moves. What about this? This will go back to a set of variations we talked about under the 2-5 invasion, right? Remember, when you play the 2-5 invasion here, black's extension is a legitimate move. And when white pushes, black blocks, and white plays on the outside, or play this exchange first, usually, and play on the outside. So this is exactly the same. White will have to play this extension on the outside. This is the only move. If you play on the inside, then locally this is not a living shape. This is not enough ice space for white. Right? Try any of this. This is not going to work for white. So white cannot extend to the corner. White can only extend to the outside. And if you play Hane like this, then there's a cutting point, right? This is obviously not great because number 3 is problematic. It's not doing much. So you have to extend first, and now black will seal off the corner. Once again, white will play this exchange and get on the outside. So this will be exactly the same as the variations for the 2-5 invasion, starting with the 2-5. So that's that, right? Pretty simple. Another option for black when your opponent plays the 2-4 invasion. Now, what about this move? This move will also go back to what we saw in the second video of the 2-5 invasion, right? This is the equivalent of playing the 2-5 first, the diagonal move second, and then white will play this extension, right? Once again, exactly the same. In this situation, white is probably not happy with just taking the 3-3 at this point. Black can block here. White will need to expand its ice space and still owes a move here, right? If white doesn't play here, then black can come in here and kill the corner, right? So if you play something like this, then number 12 clamp will just connect back. And to place something like this, then once again, even if number 10 does not clamp back, this is going to be a dead shape, right? Number 17 and 18 are miai. So number 18 will connect back these two stones. So this will be miai. So number 10 will kill the corner. White owes a move, and black, unless white is really strong on the outside, black can take sente. There is a cutting point, but I wouldn't be too worried about it at this point. So white cannot be really happy with the way this shape turns out. So that is why you probably want to play an extra move here. Black, once again, the best move is this jump instead of this extension with a hane, right? If you're not familiar with this or need a review, just check out the previous video where I talk about the 2-5 invasion and the diagonal response at E17 here, right? And then black can come into the corner and live. So that is this diagonal move. Pretty straightforward. But this is still not the optimal move, right? Not yet. Then there's another move, and that is really harsh. It's right here. It's getting on the second line. What does this mean? It means that white will be under attack. Because if white wants to live in the corner, can it really live in the corner? It can, but black will be very happy to enclose white this way. And white still owes a move on the corner, right? Because if you don't play, then this will be a ko, right? You cannot avoid the ko. If you avoid it, if you connect here, then this shape is dead. So black is kind of daring white to live in the corner, and white doesn't have enough eye space at this point. I think that's the main problem for white. So that is why this is a really harsh move. If you want to go on the attack, then yes, this is the optimal move for attack, but it's not the optimal move overall. So, of course, white can counterattack by splitting black, right? Number 2 is more isolated now. And what does black do? Black gets on the 4th line, right? You do not want to leave number 2 and allow white to press number 2. This way, white will get out more easily. Black gets on the 4th line. And white can either play this move, trying to get out, or play the 3-3 point. If white gets out, then black gets to the 3-3 point. There's no real eye for white in space, and white can only escape. This way, it'll be a fight, right? But it is playable for white, right? Otherwise, this is the only variation we need to teach, right? If it's not playable for white, that means the 2-4 invasion should not exist. But according to AI, according to professional players, this is one way that the game can proceed. So, of course, it slightly favors black because the 2-4 invasion is not optimal. But it is still playable, right? Just something to keep in mind. Then what about taking the 3-3 point? This is actually trickier. Why? Because black will block here. Now what happens is that D17 will be a problem. When black plays D17, there's a cutting point here at number 9, and there's a cutting point at number 10. These 2 points will always be mi. And what's worse is that black can get to play number 8 first. This is an even bigger headache. And white cannot really afford to leave this here, right? So in this situation, the optimal move for white is actually to answer here. But now, white also has to answer the Atari. And numbers 3 and 7 will be cut off on the outside. And this does not look good for white. The corner is alive, but only 5 points. And the outside is pretty solid. You can say there's some aji for white, right? You might be able to play something on the outside, but I think losing these 2 stones and getting cut off this way is a little too much. So that is why you need to be really careful about this shape as white, right? Especially when you play number 7. You have to follow up with number 7. Again, you cannot afford to simply get enclosed this way, because once again, you still owe moves here on the corner, right? It may not be alive locally, right? So this is not enough eye space, but of course you can push and get here. Now this is alive, but what if black doesn't give you E18 as incente? And now white will probably have to cut and start a fight somewhere. So locally, the eye space is still very, very small. And that's partly due to the starting point. Once again, the 2-4 point may not give you enough eye space in the corner. So that's number 2, right? Once again, Really harsh move. Really, really harsh move. If you play here, then black will try to attack, right? This is really black going on the attack. Any other moves we should explain? Not really, right? You just do not have any ways to counterattack effectively, right? For white. So once again, that is why you need to be a little careful. And for those of you who like to fight, right, this is something to try out if your opponent plays the 2-4 invasion. But as I said, this is not yet the optimal move. Let's get to this move. This is another way of saying white can take the corner, but black is happy to get the wall on the outside. So this is number 2 right here is another viable way for black to proceed. What should white do now? Most likely white can only take the 3-3 point. Black blocks here, not enough ice space to live yet. So white will need to extend here, and black extends. Still owes a move, so white will live this way. Right? White will have to live this way. In gote. So black has sente, black has a pretty nice wall on the outside, and black can be happy. And this is very similar to the results of this move. Really, it's an AI invention, I would say. What does this mean? This also closes off number 1. Number 1 cannot come to the third line on top, right? It can only play on the second line here. And black has a very strong wall on the outside. So white is not going to do all this. Once again, the optimal move for white is to simply take the corner. And black blocks here. And once again, white owes a move. And white will have to make a living shape. What if white takes sente? Then locally, right, get to number 6 first to play the Atari, right? This way you press all the eyes to the first line, connect here, and this is not enough eye space for white. It's only a straight 3. So white might be able to find something here, but depending on the situation, right, if you want to force white to crawl more on the second line, you can, right? So it will not be a good shape for white. That is why it's worth it for white to add a couple move here and make a living shape. Can white counterattack? I think the answer is likely no in this situation. Black will just cut white off this way. If white cuts, then let's see. I think black will just play on the outside like this. And white is too short on liberties here. And the corners is not yet alive. So this is not playable for white, right? The outside is simply too strong. So number 2 actually caps number 1, right? And now it seems like, right, these are the only 2 moves left, so one of them has to be the optimal move. But which one, right? The variations I've shown all look like this, right? And they're the same. But one is better than the other because if you play here, that gives white another option, and that is playing on the outside, right? And that is why the correct answer for the optimal move, according to AI and situation, is right here. Is this extra, not extra, but large knight's move on the third line. Very counterintuitive, right? This gets the highest score. Because if you play here, of course, if white takes the corner, then black gets a nice wall on the outside in sente, right? In sente. But if the upper side is open and white plays on the outside, then this is actually a headache for black. And by the way, it is, if you see something like this, right, toward mid-game, oftentimes number 2 is a good way for black to enclose the corner, right? It's a kind of a double enclosure, But when you have a stone on the outside, like number 1 here, number 3 is a legitimate endgame move. It is a very effective move. We'll see why in just a bit, right? So this is the equivalent of starting with a double enclosure and a stone on the outside, and now white plays this pretty annoying move on the inside. So locally, what should black do? Black, of course, can play something on the corner, but white will be able to connect, and this connection comes with at least one real eye, and it's a pretty good base for white. So that doesn't compare very well, right? If you don't want to give white a base, maybe you should have played right here, right? Or you simply should have played here, right? This base is not as good as the base we just saw. This is actually, for white stones, it's actually a pretty good base. So what else should black do? If you play here, then it seems like white will be able to live this way, right? This is enough ice space. Or if it's something like this, white can also live. But of course, you can play something like this to prevent white from getting enough ice space. And this is where the headache comes in, right? Because you are going to have cutting points on the outside. And depending on the situation, black will have to scramble to make sure that it either wins the race to capture, which is not the optimal result because you'll need to spend many moves on the inside, while white threatens by shortening black's liberties on the outside. So white will be getting free moves on the outside, where you have to scramble to make sure that once cut off, these two black groups are both alive, right? So white is essentially sacrificing the corner, but it will be a very big headache for black, right? So it is killable, right? Number 1 is killable, but it is actually going to be a very big headache, right? So similar with number 4, right? Number 4 is another killing move. White cannot make a living shape here. So after number 10, right? Of course, number 9, if you play something here, once again, this is not enough ice space. But again, right? Just these cuts, this will be a problem for black. And now black should come in here. Of course, you should try some of these other variations on your own and see what happens. If you play here, then this doesn't work, but maybe black will get here. White owes this cutting point. So locally, it's going to be dead, but it is going to be a big headache for black, okay? Because this is how black kills. Now, whites cannot make this eye because of this cutting point. Whites cannot come in from either side, so that's going to be a problem. But what white can do is actually stand down here. Now what happens is that if black destroys this eye, then if the left side is open, white can escape this way, right? This is going to be a big headache for black. White can actually escape this way. Or black can lock down white. But again, this is going to be a square 4. That's going to be quite a few liberties. And once again, we have this bumping move and this cut. And black is going to be in trouble. So in this situation, black actually cannot try to kill white, even though locally the corner is a dead shape for white. But because number 3, because of the potential cuts on the outside, this is actually a very, very big headache for black. So right here, it's a probing move. It is something that you should keep in mind, especially now. The double enclosure is very popular. You see it everywhere. Professional players play it. AI suggests it. But when you have a stone on the outside, then the 2-4 point here is actually a bigger headache after the 2 and 3 exchange, right? So that's something interesting to keep in mind. But if you play the large knights, enclosure after the 2-4 point, then white doesn't really have anything on the outside, right? This will no longer be threatening any kind of connection or any kind of cut. So that is why number 2 is the optimal solution for black when facing the 2-4 point. But of course, depending on the situation, if you want to resolve it peacefully or easily, you can go back to a pattern we already learned from the 2-5 invasion, where you can just get to the 3-3 point. White will play something on the upper side, and then black can take sente, right? These are the easier ways to go. If you want to attack, this is the way to go. If you want the best wall possible, then remember the large knight's move. So that's it for the 2-4 invasion. I think I've covered everything I want to cover. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. Thank you for watching.